All right, super coaches, we have ourselves a big video here. It's the center wing position, 30 odd players to go through, and my guess it's going to be 49 minutes. That's where I'm going to roll with this one. Fullback was somewhere near the 20 mark, so I think we'll be up there on this one, and it's a position that hosts the majority of the best scorers in this game. And I've got averages next to sort of every 10 or so. With Val Holmes kicking it off at an 80 average. And you've obviously got the fullback position. You've got guys like Cleary that eclipse that 80 and get closer to the 90 and 90 over 90 there with Tedesco. But in terms of a position that has some of the utmost importance, it's because it has so many players in it, right? And if you get this position wrong, compared to if someone gets it right, they could have two guys that are hitting sort of, that 60, 70, 80 average, have the odd ton in their game, and just week to week you feel like you're lagging behind, and that's the big thing with this position, is that you could have two guys that aren't performing well and they're going for a 40, and someone's spent a little bit of money in that center wing and they're getting those upside games, whether it's a guy before Origin and they play really well and they go a little not as good through Origin and pick it back up in the back end of the year. They could have multiple crazy good games. And you look at guys like Lomax last year, like Molitalo at the start of the year. These types of guys were absolutely dominant through the first little bit. Val Holmes had a couple of tons early on. And if you missed that and you were sitting there and spent money at hooker, or in a position that is a little bit lower upside, then you did fall behind. And that's something I really noticed. And you could spend a little bit of money up into RF, probably on one guy, and guys like Eli Katoa had that upside. You could have spent that money at 5/8, but the upside that someone like Dylan Brown has that we got caught with last year, it didn't pan out as well as what these center wings did. It was a very interesting position with the guys up top because a lot of them did have their highest averaging season. So the biggest question mark around this sort of top 4 or 5, but you can see there that Holmes had his highest by 8, Lomax by 11, Farnworth by 12, Kiraz by 13 there. It's pretty wild how those 4 worked out, but a couple of those guys that people started with were a Kiraz and a Lomax, or at least one of those two, potentially a Holmes if you got him in early, early enough like I did, probably a week or two late, but those type of guys were absolutely dominant last year, and it's going to pay to find those guys. And there's players down here in that 600 range, in the 500s with Marzhew, Graham, Tago, these types of mid-range players. It could be Marky Boy, haven't learned his name properly yet, Howarth, these types of guys that could come out and have a bit of an improvement on where they were last year and have their best Supercoach seasons, or potentially Marzhew gets back to where he was a couple of years ago, scoring so many more tries. So he averaged 25 more points in 2023. So there are guys out there that you could select at cheaper prices that could do a really good job, just like last year. Isaako's 14 points down on the year before, so all of these guys could come out on the other side and do really well. The question will be, where are you going to spend your guns money? Are you going to have one or two, over 600k in the center wing position? Or will you spend it elsewhere and try and go cheap in center wing and hope and pray? Because last year, that didn't work. That definitely didn't work. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting. So let's stick with Holmes, and the same concept that we had with the fullbacks is the pros, the cons, the upside percentage there out of 10, the downside, and then my verdict out of 10 as a buy. With Val, 784k. It's a lot of bicky there for sure. The pros for him is obviously his attacking prowess. It's incredible. The defense wasn't too great last year, but it didn't matter because he had his highest average by 8. The goals is great for him. He moves to a team that he hasn't played for before, obviously, and that's the big unknown. The team quality, the surrounding players. His halves are going to be a little bit different to Tom Dearden on that left-hand side with Kyle Flanagan. What's his left back rower going to be like? Which side does Jaden Sewer play? We don't know. All these things. So he's someone that's changed a fair bit. So there's lots of change, and he's had his highest average by 8. So can he come out in a new team and eclipse what he did last year? Can he do the same, or will he be down closer to the 70 mark that we've seen for a lot more years of his career? So they're the big questions there. But Val had 600s last year, so I had to give him an upside there of 9 out of 10. And you'll see that my boys down in fullback got a little bit higher on the upside scale, just because they did average close to 90, and Big Teddy had 1100s, which is pretty wild. So 6 is a really nice number. It was the second highest in this list, behind Kiraz with the 7 in there at 4th. But obviously means that he did have a lot of other really high quality games. So his downside risk is a 4, just because it's a new team and it's the highest that he's ever averaged. So it's hard to give him a really nice downside number. And then the verdict, I've got him at an 8.5 out of 10. And I've got a couple of guys in this list higher than that, just slightly cheaper, potentially going to a better team. And yeah, I think we'll roll with that. So Lomax comes up next, 773k, just a tick under that at 79 was his average for the year. He moves to a new team as well. So the two highest scoring centre wings both moved clubs, and it's likely that he keeps the goal kicking. He's going to have to take it off Mitch Moses, but when they played in the same team together for Australia, he did get to kick goals over Moses. So that was an interesting insight into that. He's going to be next to Moses, likely, if he plays on the wing. If he plays at centre, that's where I'm a little bit worried about him. We know that he's had his highest average ever. Yes, he played. It looks like he's improved as a player, but he got his highest average on the wing. So it's hard to leave that out of your thoughts if he does move back to centre. So that's my big worry with him. Obviously, there is unknowns just on which side he plays. Is he going to be on that in that centre position, or is he going to be in that wing spot? The new team upside is there. He had 400s, 390s last year, which was massive. Very, very consistent because he's a good runner of the footy. And that's where him at wing, he gets that sort of 5 extra runs a game, which is awesome. But coming to a team that should be better, if they're fit, if they're firing, that back line, that back 7 is incredible. Whichever side he does play on, he's going to have quality around him, whether it's Dylan Brown or whether it is Moses. Because there's a chance that if he does play centre, he goes to the left because Penasini's on the right. So a lot to think about still with Lomax. And I do have him at a 9 out of 10 on the verdict scale. Just a slight less downside risk for him, just because I think that he's in a better team and he's a great runner of the footy. Seems to get lots of runs. Just tends to have less bad games, I suppose, than Val. And that is coming from a Cowboys fan. I do love Val, but yeah, that's probably where you're at with Lomax. And I just have him slightly over Holmes if he's on the wing, but probably changes that verdict if he is in the centres at the Eels. But we know that when they're humming, they're a really fun team and can be very attacking. Herbie Farnworth, $728,000 for him. Wow, the pros for him, that running game, the tackle breaks is wild how that plays out. And probably the main worry would be the team quality. They lose Wayne, and not a top 8, every year type of team. So a lot of the work that he does is off his own bat and the quality of player that he is. But you're looking at his IS average by 12. It was with a new team, so he moved and got his best average. So I think there's more of that to come. He had some tremendous upside, especially in the back end of the year, some really massive hundreds. And so he gets a 9 out of 10 with the 4 tons that he picked up. And the downside of 3, just because of his running game and his consistency of running near the 200 meters and picking up bulk tackle breaks, whereas Val can have some off games with errors and the like too. So my verdict for Farnworth, he's at a 9 as well, so very similar to all of the guys that we just went through. Someone I probably, I just think at the 50k less, he seems more intriguing than the guys above, just with less change. So I think that if you picked any of those guys, it would be a great selection. But yeah, highest average of 12 above, obviously, as well. And you move to Kiraz, 702k, 28k cheaper than Farnworth again. So that is helpful. His team's improved. His running game's incredible. He has tremendous upside. He had 700s and a 90 across the season, and he started a little bit slow. He had a couple of games in amongst there when they weren't going right with Hutchison there. So there's a little bit of value on top of that. Volatility with him is the problem because he has all that massive upside. For him to be down here in 4th on the price list means that he's had a bunch of games there where he doesn't score incredibly well and is fairly low. So that's something to think about with Mr. Jacob. That volatility, and yeah, just outdid his prior scoring by a mile. But hearing him talk in the off-season on the podcast there just shows that he's still battling some injuries, and he's really hoping that he can get a season where he feels good and his back's not a problem. So yeah, can he score exactly the same? Definitely. Dogs have a really nice run for non-origin guys too. If he doesn't get into that space, then he becomes a guy that you could hold for the season, again, like last year, which is really cool. When you're comparing Holmes and Lomax, they will have origin attached to them. And Farnworth, another win for him on that front. Dom Young, wow, he's got some pros, that's for sure. The speed, the running game, his ability just to get around defenses with that speed is incredible. The volatility for him, the loss of the halves, loss of Manu, I think is really big for Dom Young. The quality of their team probably drops a little bit. And you do look at that upside and you go, wow, he has some big games, but he has the big tons. In whatever he had, 100 in 16 minutes or whatever it was that game. But he only did have the 400s compared to these guys. So the upside sitting in that 8 or just over 8 on that front. And there's some decent downside as well. He had the send-off game. He has low games where he gets 30s. Similar to Kiraz, he can be a 30s and 40s guy at times. And then has those games where you just need to jump on him at the right time. Feels like one of those guys. So that's where the downside is there. If you miss that month where he goes really well, or if you get the month where he's poor and trade him, that's definitely a risk in your side, that's for sure. So I have him with the slightly lower upside, similar downside at a 7.8. I haven't got him in the bold there. I just don't think he's one of the guys you want to start with. There seems to be more downside risks than upside on the good side there with Dom Young, with that team, and without Manu, who actually really helped him out, to be fair, across last year. For a guy that we thought was a ball runner first, his passing game was great and a massive improvement across his whole career. Manu, so that was great. Dane Gagai, 694. I have him at an 8.5 verdict, so a much more fun number there. And the pros for him, it's his third season, 68 or above. So he picked up 71 in the season just gone, and it just shows that the consistency is there, which is absolutely massive. When you look at all the guys above, it's their best season by far, and this guy's cheaper. Yes, the upside's not there as much. He doesn't have as many tons, but the consistency of the 70s, the 60s, the 80s is there with Dane. With just a low score of 42 last year, that's far exceeds everyone else's lowest score in this list. Mr. Dom Young, minus 15. But the cons for him is a little less upside, obviously, than the guys above. He's a little bit older, and yeah, it's a fun one. They have a really nice start to the season. Then they have the round 4 bye, which could be annoying. But there's also a guy that's unlikely to play Origin. So again, similar to that with Kiraz, is if you buy these guys now, you're likely to be able to hold them throughout the entirety of the season, which Gagai seems to be a player that we end up looking at towards the middle of the year or closer to round 20 as a guy that you finish with because of that consistency, because of the upside on Gags and that team, usually in the back half of the season. And I think he's found a really nice winger with him in Fletcher Sharp. So that did add to him last year. They went right a lot more because they found a lot of success down that side. So Gagai is a really interesting player under 700k that I think can do a really good job. So I've got him at the 8.5, more for the fact that I think he could be a season-long guy that has enough upside and can consistently score you 70, which is amazing, right? In the grand scheme of things, to pay under 700k for a guy that can be consistently big is awesome. So he's one of the top guys on my list, even at the age. He just continues to do it. And if the Knights can play fairly well, then it just adds to his awesome scoring. Brian To'o, 688k. He is the GOAT in a GOAT team. There's not too much else to say, to be fair, on To'o. Very, very consistent. He had a lack of tries last year that really hurt him. The change of side, that left-hand side was getting a few more tries, especially in the first half of the year. And with Cleary being out, they kept him on that right-hand side. And that makes it a little bit tough for someone like To'o who, if he's scoring tries with his base stats, it's absolutely incredible. So that's something to note with him. He still had 400s and a 90 last year, but the volatility was not his best suit last year because of the lack of tries. His base stats will get him to the 40s, but he had a lot of them without those tries. So for him to still hit an average of 70 or just a tick over 70 is pretty incredible with the lack of tries that he did score. So still a great upside, has the consistency similar to that of Dane Gagai. You do get him all the way through until just before Origin, so no buys in that one compared to Gags. That's where his benefit is, and I have him as a really solid purchase at 8 out of 10. You know what you're getting. If Cleary is there, then hopefully they do go right a bit more, and if Tago can play a little bit better, I think that whole side will benefit. It'll benefit Tago, but it will benefit To'o there, and Lee Martin as well on the right-hand side. So he's a really interesting selection, and I have him as a top sort of 8 buy in the Supercoach, in the centre wing Supercoach landscape. Reuben Garrick, priced at 70. For him, the big thing here is he has 4 years 70 or above in a row. He has the goals. He had 3 games last year with concussion, so he had the low minutes, and that's one of his cons. The 3 head knocks last year at centre, and so his centre is safest spot. But what the funny thing was the majority of those issues that he had with head knocks were from just him getting hit in the head, running the footy back. So that could easily happen on a winger's run. But I suppose as a centre, you're taking the second or third carry. If the winger takes that first one, you'll take that second one on that side, and there's more chance of you getting whacked, which I think is where those head knocks came. Hopefully he changes the way he runs a little bit, but there was just some times last year I owned him, and just watching him, like, I think one, he got whacked in the head, and then the next run, they just whacked him in the head again. There was some unluckiness in terms of the laziness in hitting him. So even with that, he still hit over 70 average. So 4 years in a row is hard to push away from. We saw that with Gags as well, but Garrick is younger. He has the goal kicking as well. He's someone's really interesting, and as you've seen from my team reveal, he is my gun right now in the center wing position, just for that consistency. And we know that he has, upwards of near 90 upside in, 3 years ago. So he has the 9 out of 10. He had 500s last year, 390s. So that's 8 really good scores in amongst some head knock games and whatever else. But the downside's there with the head knock chance. And just, moving around, I think that's probably all we can really say on Garrick on that front. So I have him as a 9 out of 10, and he's in line with the top scorers in terms of the 9. That's because they are the best scorers in this position. But at a cheaper price point, he becomes the guy that I do select from round 1 when we have a lower salary cap. Jermaine Isaako, 616, 700. The pros for him, he's priced at 14 points under the year prior. So, with Herbie next to him, likely. We did see some shots, some video of Herbie next to Isaako on that right-hand side. So that's where there could be a little bit of benefit on Jermaine. Was the year before just an outlier? You could probably say that. He had more consistency across the whole year. Whereas last year he started fairly well. I did bring him in after a really massive game, and then he really stunk it up for a lot of the year, unfortunately. So if he can remove that portion of his game, but the big thing there was that they did go left a lot. They went left to Bostock early on the year. Then there was a month stretch where they went back that way to Isaako, and it was like, oh, happy days. He's gonna dominate again. And then they did spend more time on the left. When you got Herbie on the left, why wouldn't you? So upside for him, 7.5 out of 10, just the 200s last year, so a little bit low. And then downside risk is if they continue to go left or it stops at Herbie, then I do think he could have stretches of games like he did last year where he hits 30s, 40s, 20s, and 50s, and then just doesn't get those try scoring points. And you're relying on goals then, and he can miss the odd goal, that's for sure. Dylan Lucas, 616. And sorry, just to finish with Isaako, I think he's a really solid pick. It's 7 out of 10. It's just, it does come with some risk, and I think it can pay off, but I think it could miss as well. Dylan Lucas, number 10. His pros, he averaged 71 in edge starts last year, which is absolutely incredible. So plenty of attacking upside. He's priced into low 60s there. You've got Alamoti at 585 with a 60, so he's at about 63 there, which is pretty solid for a guy that you got dual position with centre wing and 2RF, and he obviously has consistency, being a second row forward, which is obviously great. The cons for him is he's still not confirmed. He has that spot full time. He's got Frizzell, he's got Karpis Paul there. He could easily get moved in game as well. He seems to be the guy that, pre-game for one, but also during game, if there's an injury out in the wing or the centers or at fullback and things get shuffled around, Lucas ends up at center where he scores okay. He obviously did well enough last year during those times, but not super ideal. Definitely not what you want from a bigger guy that can run a really good line at, in the back row or get that nice dink through, little grubber through for a try. You want him in that spot doing his thing. So that's the worry with him. The upside's 7 out of 10, pretty solid. Downside's pretty low. It's more for the fact that he can get moved. And does he keep an edge spot long term? Do we see Frizzell go to the middle? Do we see Karpis pull off the bench? Lots of questions. How is it going to go? But I have him at an 8 out of 10. If he gets the edge spot starting, still a really nice pick. But do you want to go for upside in the center wing position to start the year? Or do you want to plug away with a guy that can be fairly consistent? But when you're looking at a lot of these top center wings, their bad games are 30s and 40s, which then is followed by 90 or 100, which probably Lucas doesn't have. So if you're holding guys for a longer period of time, then it's probably worth going the other guys. I think Lucas is probably a better fantasy pick than he is a Supercoach pick, but we'll see how that plays out. Paul Alamoti, 585, 800, price of the 60. So for him, he hit the next level. He hit the NOS in the final series, that's for sure. He's very consistent during that time. And we had Taylor May on that left-hand side that really struggled to score any decent points. And I suppose once Alamoti there, they used him a lot more and he looked great. 60 in the regular season, but was a lot better through that finals. And for him, it is just a lack of current upside that kind of stops me from going for him. At that price, I think if it was closer to 500k, it'd be more of an option. Just had the 100 last year. Fairly low downside. I think it's got that spot now, and he's just a youngster ready to improve. So he's an exciting guy to have a look at, Mr. Paul Alamoti, with a 6.9 verdict out of 10. Selwyn Cobbo, 550k for him. The pros, he just hasn't completely hit his potential, to be honest with you. There's some likely team improvement, which is there. So it's just all a couple little things I think can help him out. He's got Hunt and Reynolds. He's got the new coach. I don't see him going under 550k, but does he take the next leap? The cons for him is he hasn't gone over a 60 average yet, which is pretty frustrating, to be fair, for a guy that has so much talent. So that's where I think he can be a pretty decent pick if you want to take that plunge. But when you've got guys like Garrick, yes, more expensive, but pay that extra bit of cash for Kiraz, these types of guys that can go hundreds on the reg and that have consistent years in a row of going, Gagais and stuff in the high 60s and above. It's very tough to jump on someone that could just plod and not have that upside. So probably pick someone else. But the upside 6.5, downside of 4. The verdict at 6.5 out of 10 for Cobbo. For Greg the Leg Marzhew, 513.7k. Pros for him, he's at the lowest price and scoring that he's had in 4 years. When I said he scored 25 more points in 2023, it's pretty wild for a guy that you're going to get. If you've got Alamoti price at 60, you've got Greg Marzhew in the low 50s. And meaning he scored high 70s in the year prior. So that's pretty crazy that he could get back to that point. And that's where the interest in Greg comes. He has the try scoring. He has the running ability to just run over people. It's incredible. But the cons for him, he just looked off last year. He didn't look his best. Right side are going better. So they didn't go left as much, especially in that back end of the year when a lot of us bought him at that cheaper price. He just never really got the pill. And that's the problem. That is a problem. When he had 100 last year, he's still got the upside of 8.5 out of 10 because he can go high 70s. Just there was no tries for him last year. And they just feel clunky, to be honest with you. Like with so many halves, just didn't look great for him. So it was an absolute gamble which way they went. And a lot of time it stuck through the middle and they just didn't have flow. And you need flow to get out to these guys on the wings. And they found a bit of flow on that right-hand side. They just never found the left-hand side flow, sadly, which looked like, every time they got down there in 2023 that it was going to be a Ponga to Greg pass, cutout ball, and he's going to go over untouched. It just isn't or get him one-on-one. It just didn't feel that way last year. So I have him at an 8 out of 10 verdict, but he could plod similar to Cobbo. And that could be the issue there if they don't go left. Campbell Graham, $505,000. His pros are that he's had 63 and a 69 average season in 2022 and 2023. So he's an incredible overall player, attack and defense. Was obviously pushing to play Origin there, and well deserved because he's absolutely incredible. The cons for him is that sternum. He's had 1.5 real issue years with it, and similar to the issues that Munster's dealing with, is this going to go away? Or is this going to be something that's there? And they finally got kind of a late surgery on it. They'll try and do some different things. Wasn't working. So hopefully he comes out and looks and feels a lot better. He's saying that he's just happy to feel like a footballer again because he hasn't felt that way in the last couple of years. So that's massive news for Campbell. And at $505K, with a team that's hopefully improving, he's got Latrell with him. He's got Mitch Dodd. He's got Walker. There's plenty of good players in this side. He's got Kolomatangi likely next to him. So a really nice player that has plenty of upside, but what's this injury going to do to his quality? He'll be easily a guy that you watch in the trials and see how he looks. I think with Graham, a nice upside on his price, downside to 3.5. I think just injury is the main worry with him and how he comes back. So I've got him in at 8 out of 10 as well. A lot of guys in this mid-range here that could do a decent job for your sides. Isaac Tungo. Pros for him is he's got some really nice scores in him and some nice seasons in him. And that wasn't last year. He's priced 17 and 9 points lower than in 2022 and 2023. Started the year beautifully last year, and then it all went downhill. That's for sure after I bought him at 700 and something K. But no Luai, I think is going to be helpful to him. He's on the right there, and with Luai gone, it means it's Cleary ball for a lot of it. They'll send it left to some guys, but it won't be targeted as much. It will just be we'll set the left up so we can go right at the end to score. And I think guys like To'o and Tungo are going to benefit this year better than he did last year, and he has to play better as well. But with Cleary there, he does play better with Cleary. The cons for him, he just wasn't great. Without Cleary, he didn't play as well last year. Like I said, the upside for him, it's at a 7, I think. There is a little bit of a worry on the downside with him. He's not someone that goes big tons regularly. He had a couple of great games at the beginning of last year, but then he was just very mid for a lot of the season. But I have him at an 8 out of 10. I think that, as I said, him and To'o can have a really nice season and get plenty more ball. We'll see how it goes, that's for sure. But at 501K, it's not very expensive to find out for a guy that can be a mid-60s guy, for sure, or at least a 60 guy, which is not priced there at the moment. Jarrell Skelton, $499,000. So for him, he's a terrific ball runner. Yeah, we've seen that. He's had 4 games last year that he played, and he got 2 90s with 2 tries and then 2 lower games, but he did average 64 across those 4 games. So to be priced near the 50 mark is obviously nice for that. He moves from the Doggies to the Tigers, which who knows how that's gonna end up at the Tigers, and that's the big question mark. How's it gonna go? Does he have the spot in the side on a wing? Does he get straight there? His defense has been a problem, which keeps him out of sides. So does he lose his spot? You're looking at sort of the price to experience ratio. I think with Jarrell is that it's 500K for a guy that you don't know a lot on in first grade. There's not a lot to go off, so that's the punt I think you'd be taking with Skelton, and why I have him at a 5 downside. The upside we know is there. He's a really, really solid ball runner. It's incredible just watching him go. Ends up making lots of breaks down the sideline as well. So 7 out of 10 for Skelton. I think he can have a really solid season with the Tigs. Now for Blakey Wilson. I had him as someone when I thought about it, I was like, oh, he'll get the spot, and I'm pretty interested, but you do look at his scores and it doesn't look as nice as what you would have thought, because the volatility is not there. The volatility is there because of his lower base. So he doesn't go anywhere near. If you compare both Skelton and Wilson, it's almost double the base that Skelton brings with his running. So that sucks. At the pros, he's a really good player. I love watching him play. He just seems like a really strong finishing winger. Just seems smart. But yeah, that's the work rate, the base isn't there as much as those bigger, meaty forwards. He's just a good player. But he has a higher chance of holding that spot. I think this year especially I think once he gets that spot, he's going to keep it. But he also has Montoya that he has to worry about. Just feels like he's a guy that is just going to be okay and not someone that could make or break the beginning of this season. I think he could be fine unless he happens to score a triple or a quad or something and the dogs are flying. But a 6 upside, a 5 downside, just a 6 out of 10 for Wilson at this point. Casey McLean. The pros for him, he's in a great team. He's a young gun centre. I don't think he plays with Alamoti there, unless he ends up on the wing there. That could be the play. I don't think they'll push Alamoti to the wing. So on the wing, is it a different play for him at 443? It's interesting, definitely. But that's the question: does he make the side? And a bit of a lack of upside in that centre position. So maybe if it is wing, he can have more upside. But it's all a guess at this point. So a 6 upside for him, a 4 downside, and I've got him at a 6 out of 10 at this point. All right, let's give it a try. Nawanga Nitawazi. There you go. I just had to say it a few times. There we go. 438 for him. The pros, he's likely to get the starting centre, it looks like. Him and Rob Toyer are currently training there, so that's good news. He has lots of talent coming over from Union. Was a quality player over there and comes into a great system. That's what you want with him, and we'll add him to the dictionary while we're there. Beautiful. Thank you, Word. The cons for him is the team. Is it potentially in decline? Does he have the players around him, the halves around him to get him good footy and get him some tries and try assists? That's going to be the big question. If he's on the right-hand side at centre, then he's got Dom Young next to him. If he's on the left-hand side, he's got Daniel Tupou, which is great both ways because they're both good scoring players that he could benefit from with line breaks down either side, even passing back to him on the inside if that's how they end up, or some catch and pass stuff, which you get a little mini line assists, we'll call them. So yeah, try contributions. There you go. Mini assists. Cons, yeah, we went through that. And then the upside for him, it's a 7 out of 10. I think he has the ability to get to the mid 500s probably. Is that enough to buy from ball one? And the downsides at 4, just being newer to the game, team that's slightly not as good. When I keep saying team decline, are they going to be a top 4 team this year? Don't think so. So it has to be decline. A 7 out of 10 for him. Adam Dewey. He's going to be an interesting one, isn't he? He's priced at 45, has the dual 5/8 as well. The pros for him, it's the DPP, obviously. He's never gone under the 50 average across his season, but he's usually played 6. He's in a better side this year. Got to get through a lot of games last year, which is great. Maybe gets the goals. Does he take it off Appy? That's the question. He has good base in general. The cons for him, it's the injuries. He's not in his preferred position, so there's definitely a few worries. And the price at 431 is not, it's not chump change. It's not just like, take a throw at the stumps and see what happens. It's enough money where you could go up just an extra 80k to get to a Greggy Marzhew, or you can go up to Graham or Tungo, these kind of guys, and it's a scary price, I think, because it's a price where we're looking at last year a little bit higher than what we're looking at with like Hutcho and with Salmon and these types of guys there, with Taylor May, and it can kind of just stagnate you in your beginning of the season, to be honest, at that price point. So that's my only worry with Dewey, is that what's he going to be like at centre? Does he look great? Does the team look great? If it all does, I think it can work, but it can also have some downside. So the upside of the price is there. He's scored really well before, but yeah, I've got to put him at a 5 downside there and a 7 out of 10. So just a solid pick. Jack Howarth. He interests me a little bit more than some others. I think similar to Alamoti, he really showed his form at the back end of the season, especially in the finals. And that's massive. If you can do that in a final series when all the chips are in, everything matters, that's awesome. And he's in a super strong team. So the bye round 2 is a little bit frustrating. Hasn't showed upside so far. Hasn't scored a lot of tries either. So him at left centre, if Munster's in decent form, if Blore starts playing, they start going left a bit more, that's probably more the worry. But they started going left more in finals. So if that's how this is going to play out in the regular season as well, then awesome. But they do have Hughes and Eli Katoa on the right. So it's going to be hard. Both sides need the footy. Can they get it? But at 426k, I think he's someone that you can pay to find out, and he could be a 600 plus K guy. They kept giving him the footy, so the base stat goes up, but did they go left? That's the question. So 3 downside at the price, in my opinion. I really like him as a pick, so I'm giving it a 7.5 as the verdict. Ben Trbojevic, 419. His pros, he's got the DPP with 2RF, which is good. He got through most of the year, which is great. And there's potential there. If he's to get that left edge spot, and you do need to take a look at him at just under 420k. He didn't explode last year like we hoped. That's the big problem. And the low upside. Like, he just nowhere near getting tons. Played awesome that first game and just never really got anywhere near that again. So the upside for him is at a 6 with the position at the price, and then the downside's at a 5. He still has injuries around him. He doesn't have tremendous upside, so he could easily just plod. So I've got him at 6.9 out of 10. Yeah, he'll be interesting. That team will be interesting. We'll leave it at that. Ty Munro, 397k. The upside for him, I think, is there for sure. We've seen him have really nice games. The base is a bit of a problem for him, but he's in a healthier team. Hopefully he can get through the year unscathed. If he plays on that right-hand edge, he's likely to have Graham next to him, which is massive. I think that's huge. Colin Matangi, if he's back on the edge there, you've got Graham and you've got Munro. With an attacking half, if Dodd gets it, I think it's really cool. But the injuries is the big worry for Munro there. So we've given him a 7 out of 10 upside. The downside's still at a 5 with the injuries and just being a young player. And then the verdict's 7 out of 10 as a good selection this year. Zachy Labart, very similar boat to Munro. Coming off injury, does he make the round 1 side? Is also the question. Same with Ty. I've got him at the same upside, downside, and verdict, a 7 out of 10. The pros for him, he had a lovely 100 game last year. I did own him. It was great. And then it fell off a cliff with a couple of low ones because they were going left with Val, obviously. Think of that, Jamie. He's a lovely ball runner. There's a couple of steps that he did in that first game were just spectacular. So that's great. But coming off an ACL is obviously a worry. It'll be 11-month return, given he did it in round 4, I believe. Yeah, round 3, round 4. He's in a slightly worse team, I think, but they didn't go right much last year, but they also, if Val's not there, do they go left as much? They have Did in there, so we'll see how that one plays out. But that, Did and Val, Lukey, Murray Talangi, left-hand side was pretty strong, and that's where the reduction of going to the right is. So we'll see how that one plays out over the preseason. Jackie Bird, hey? He's going to be an interesting thought for people this year. 379k. He's got the second row forward dual as well. The pros for him, if he's in the middle, it's a really safe 50-plus scorer, in my opinion, as we've seen in the previous 3 years for Bird. When he played edge and some games at middle, it was really, really nice. So price is really good, under 380k. So the big issues are the injuries. He is one of those guys that could easily move to center with injuries. Do they pop him there if he's playing in the middle compared to if they play, Seyfarth on that right edge or Samuel Lefanu? Did they go to the edge first or does Bird go? And I think that Bird's a better center than those guys. So Bird should move to the centers. That's the worry. Last year you had Bateman that would do it a bit. He's not there. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. But if the team's better and he's actually fit, he looks good in photos, but we know that it's preseason. Similar story with him. 7 upside, 5 downside, but at that price point, a little bit better than the guys ahead of him. A 7.5 verdict for Jackie Bird. It's going to be fun. I hope he does well. I really hope he does well. He's so good to watch when he's in full flight. No pun intended. Jack Bird. Jesse Arthur's 341k. Man, he's an interesting fellow. Scoring tries in a good team is his pro. If he can do that, he can have great stretches, but he needs bulk tries. Bulk tries. He's a consistent 35 guy. It's actually wild. He has 4 years in a row between like 35 and 34 and 37 or 38. It's just ridiculous how that plays out. So I don't think we need guys that don't have Bostock upside where he can go 80, 90 ton and get to a 50, 60 average at times. Just don't see it. So 5 is the upside for him. Downside's 5. Verdict's 5. Just keep it simple with Arthur's. Very funny one to see that last 4 years. Carter Gordon comes over as well from the Union. 336k. He's a very exciting player. He's great to watch from highlights. Exciting team for sure. Buying round 1 is frustrating. Does he make the team? It sounds like he may not make the 17 in round 1, just from a little bit of the news that's coming out at the moment. There's a little bit of news coming out that Campbell and AJ Brimson are a good chance of playing in the halves, and Mr. Kieran Foran is going to end up being the utility guy, which is pretty wild. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see that one play out. But he's new to the sport. Yeah, there's worries there. There's round 1 bye. I think you can wait, see what happens with him. If he makes the side round 2, you could trade him in round 4, if that's how you want to play it. Upside's going to be there at 7. The downside's at 6, more for the fact that he could just be in and out of the team. So 6.5, if he gets the spot, it's cheap enough to find out with his upside. Jackson Paulo there with an interesting way it's going to play out with the Cowboys. He's moved over there now. There's so many guys that could fill that spot in the outside backs, but he's a 40-plus guy in a decent team. So at 335k, it's very, very low compared to what he can do. But he had a bad season. He dropped his price a lot, so that could be good for buying him at some point. But he had a bad season. Does he improve, and does he go back to some better seasons? To a better season? That's the question. He's fighting for his spot. Just doesn't feel like there's much upside with him. So 555 for Jackson Paulo as well. Isaiah Tass, you have to have some interest in him for sure. 327 900. The years prior, he was massive. He had 2 seasons in a row, 55, 57, I believe. So that's huge. 1 try in 8 games last year. Not great. A 200k price drop from where he started the year. And that puts him at a 327, which is massive. For if he can get that spot, he's very, very cheap. And I think if he gets the spot, he will be in a lot of people's sides. So he just didn't look great last year, to be fair. Even in those 8 games, he'd go close to scoring, but just didn't look like, he just hasn't got that mongrel. He's not going to go over the line. And just a little bit of a fall off on the 2 years past. So assuming he was carrying something, or his just confidence was down, if he can get that back, then he'll be in a lot of people's sides. Upside's a 7, downside's a 4 at the price. 7 out of 10 verdict, pretty solid if he gets it, but we don't know if he will at this point. When I first looked at Fletcher Myers, I was like, with Johnson out, he probably gets that wing spot again. He looked pretty good, and then I looked at his stats and went, probably not. He had a solid intro to first grade, but that was it. It was solid. He had one game with tries. The cons for him, he's fighting for the spot. He's going to lose the goals. I say likely. With Latrell back, he loses the goals. So that's not ideal either. And his scores just weren't great in the few games that he played. So that's why he's at 322. It's as simple as that. He has a little bit of a discount, but 5.5 on the upside because he didn't have it last year. And the downside's a 4 out of 10. So 5.5 for Fletcher. A few to go. Billy Smith, the pros for him, he's a great player. He's a 50-plus scorer pre-injury last year, but big problem is he gets injured a lot. Injury machine, sadly. Such a talented player, but, and he wasn't spotted at training recently with Toa and Marky Boy in the centres there. So the upside for him is a 7. The downside's a 6 though, so I've got him a 6 out of 10. If he happens to make the side, then we'll look at him, but until then, it's a no. Starford Toa, this one is so interesting to me. Is he going to get this spot? That's the big question. He played 3 games last year and he got injured in all 3 of them. Hamstrings a couple of times. Can't remember what the first one was, but it wasn't great there. And the pros for him is he had a 49 average in 2023 in a pretty bad team. And we've seen guys like Nofaluma come out and still score well in bad teams. Toa was kind of doing that. He'd go missing though. He'd have the really big game where he torched Holmes and then he went back into his shell. So if he can reach his full potential, then he's probably a 50, 55 guy. Let's just say he goes back to 49. That's a lot of cash gains. That's a couple $100K. So in a better team, he's cheap. Good player. I think he could be fine. But he had that 3 injuries in 3 games, just throws it right out of the water. So hopefully he's good to go. A 7 upside for him when he can hit a ton. And on the price there, downside of 4 out of 10 at the price. Just the injuries are a worry. And then the verdict is 7 out of 10 for Starford Toa. Really, really fun player. That's for sure. Jackson Purdue, one of the guys I'm hanging my hopes on this year, that he can come in and play really well if he gets his opportunity. And that's the big worry with Jackson. Does he get a starting spot in round 1? If he does, he will be in all of our sides. If he does not, then that could be the worry there at 257k. He's fighting for that 7 spot, but I think even he admitted the other day that Clifford is ahead at this point in time. But we did see last year that coaches can pull the trigger. Benji did with Galvin and just said he was the guy, he's going to be the guy. And Jackson could be that man. We need something. We definitely need something in the Cowboys. He's a young gun. He was their player of the year last year, I believe. And just the spot's not guaranteed. But if he gets it, he's in. Can't wait for it to see him play because he's really, really talented, which is great. Upside 7 out of 10, downside 3 if he makes a spot. You've just got to take a punt. 7.5 out of 10 if he gets it. Jesse McLean, brother of Casey, youngster, even younger, 234k. He skipped a couple of grades last year to get his opportunity. So did Casey. So the talent's there for sure. He's going to be ready if injuries. I just don't think he gets the spot in anywhere near round 1 unless there's injuries. So 7 out of 10 for upside, 5 out of 10 for downside because he could be in and out. 7 out of 10 if he does get picked. I think you can get him straight away, or you wait until round 3 where his price changes. Last 2, Robert Darby. I think going through this, we might be closer to the 40-minute mark. We'll see how we go. Robbie boy, 214k. The pros for him, he's had a couple years more experience, and we've seen him play one game. We've seen these stats in Q Carb. They are spectacular running stats, which is what we want. I just think that he's probably ready now. A couple of years ago, you go, oh, he could come in, he could do a job, but he's going to be hit and miss. Whereas 2 years down the line, that's very, very helpful. The cons for him, he's just had the one game so far, so he's still obviously on the fringe. And if he gets picked as well, he's a 7 out of 10. Probably just slot him in your sides as a cheapie. 7 out of 10 for upside, 5 out of 10 for the downside. And the same setup for Rob Toa. He's on the fringe, obviously. You got Billy Smith sitting there. They could change things up at the blink of an eye. He's a young gun. He's in the Roosters system. The price is really nice. Even under 200k, that's awesome. And he's been seen training in the centres. So he's someone that I think you sit on your benches right now and hope for the best. Give him some good juju if he's 60% owned, that he actually makes it. And we leave it at that for all the players. It's 36 players. Just thinking back on it now, once you finish this video, which guys right up top stand out? You've got guys in the mid-range. You've got guys at the cheap range. I think it's a position that you can fill up really easily. Which players you pick is the big question. And I think hopefully if I've been able to explain it well enough for you, that there are guys that are going to stand out well enough to be picked, and then you know that they're a high chance of doing well. There are guys on here that you probably could pick and they're not really going to go anywhere, or they're a decent chance of not moving very far. You want to go for guys with upside in good teams, obviously. Have they done it before? These are all the questions you want to ask in the center wing position, because last year, I think it was the most important position, and it should be again this year. It's just going to depend on how high people can go on their prices. Lomax, Kiraz, all these guys, they went up massive on their prices and on their previous averages. Will we have some guys do similar work this year from the mid-range? Or will we have to spend money on these top guys to get that sort of 75 average or so and that upside and lock that in? And some people will go for mid-range only and some cheapies and go for the 3 fullbacks, and that's an option as well, for sure. And avoid Iongi, but I just feel like there's a lot of... it depends on the cheapies we get to. If we get a tremendous amount of cheapies, then you're going to have to let go of some, and that's maybe where you can make decisions. But if we don't get these guys down here we're talking about, and Darby's, Jacksons, you're going to have to spend up a little bit more. Like, do you get Toas? Do you get Isaiah Tasses? Like, do any of these guys play? If they don't, it could be a problem, and you do need to spend up a bit more, and therefore you do get Iongi, or you get some of these other cheapies. But it'll be interesting for sure. But just to reiterate my strategies going into it, there's a few things you can do. This was before I looked at the players, and I do think it stands up strong now. So I think it's, you got options of the 1 top gun, probably 1 to 2 guys between that sort of 500 to 600, and then 1 350k and a bunch of cheapies. You can go 3 guys between that 450 and 600-ish, 2 350s, 2 cheapies. And number 3 is to see what pops up, just to let you know that things will change heaps. Cheapies will or will not pop up, and that's where you will make your decisions. Basically, is once we get team lists, you can just decide and make those final decisions on what you want to do with the position and how many cheapies, how many guns you can have and the like. So it's going to be a fun position. I wanted to spend a fair bit of time on these guys because I think it is the most important position. Hooker, meh. Front row forward, it can help a little bit, meh. Second row forward, another massive position that I think is pretty important. If you can get that right, because there's so many playing players in that position, probably got one on the bench as reserve as well. You got 5 guys or so. And if they have a nice average of 60 between them compared to having a couple of 20s and whatever, and it's 200 instead of 300, there's 100 points just there from getting that right. So similar with the center wing, it could be 100 to 200 points weekly. That changes things tremendously. So thanks so much for listening to the center wings there. We'll move on, keep going up the line. I've done the 5/8 as well, so that'll come out next, and then we'll go halves and all the way up from there. So thanks for being here, and we'll catch you in the next Supercoach NRL video.